Good evening. I want to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Elmhurst Zoning and Planning Commission and Board of Appeals. Due to the constraints of the pandemic, I need to first check to make sure that everyone can hear. So, Commissioner Snyder, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Emily Egan in the applicant room, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Mike Kopp in the public comment room, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Kiki Andriopoulos, the court reporter, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Commissioner Hoffman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Commissioner Pittman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Commissioner Burns, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
And Commissioner Uditsky, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you. I'll now ask City Planner Eileen Franz to please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Commissioner Burns.
Here.
Commissioner Callaway is absent. Commissioner Garland is absent. Commissioner Hoffman.
Here.
Commissioner McCoy is absent. Commissioner Pittman.
Here.
Commissioner Snyder.
Here.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Here.
Chair Rose.
Here. We have a quorum. Thank you. First item of business is public comment. This is a point in our meeting when anyone can make a comment on any zoning issue. Does not have to be one that's on our agenda, but if there is a zoning issue that you wish to address or talk about, this is your time to do that. So I will first ask Mike Kopp in the public comment room, is there anyone there who wishes to make a general public comment?
No, there is not.
Okay. Eileen, have we received any emails of anyone who wishes to make a general public comment?
Let me check. No, we have not.
Thank you. Emily, I saw you running to check voicemail. Is there anyone who's left a voicemail message indicating they wish to give public comment at this time?
There are no voicemails.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no requests for public comment, we'll then close that section of the agenda. The next item is receipt of written communications. Eileen, are there any written communications that we have received that are not on board docs, that were not posted there?
No, there are not.
Okay. We will then close that item of business. The next item of business is business before the committee, and it's the approval of the minutes from our June 15th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes and a second? Commissioner Snyder moves, Commissioner Pittman seconds. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections that any commissioner would like to make to those minutes? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Eileen Franz to please call the roll.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes, the minutes are approved. The next item of business is case number case number 21P09. I'm going to ask Emily Egan, who is the project manager on this case, to please introduce this case to us.
Thank you, Chair Rose. This is case 21P09. This application was filed on June 1st, 2021. The date of legal notice of public hearing was July 1st, 2021. The date of the posting of the sign was July 2nd, 2021. The date of the first class mailing of notice was sent on July 2nd, 2021. And tonight is the public hearing, July 20th, 2021. And this is a request for a conditional use permit for a combined preliminary and final PUD for the purpose of constructing townhomes with 3 units. The applicant is with me here, John McNally from Pike Properties, the owner and the developer. I did want to make note that there are 2 agenda items that were added to board docs just recently, the landscape plan and the feasibility plan, financial feasibility document.
Can I ask you what time those were added to board
So,
docs?
I could get you the exact time, but it was this morning.
Okay,
So,
all right.
yes. And one last item of note is there are no site development allowances being requested. There are no site development allowances being requested.
Correct. Thank you very much. I will now ask the court reporter to swear in any speakers, certainly the applicant and anyone else who, other than commission members or staff who wishes to speak about this case. So will you, let me ask the court reporter to please swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that any testimony given this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank
I do.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to hand it over to the applicant at this point, just so you know. Obviously, we've all read the material. It's usually our practice that we go to the site, look at the site. So this is a site that's pretty well known, I'm suspecting, to most people anyway. So please give us your idea of what it is you plan to do, and then we will have questions from commissioners. We'll then allow any public testimony that's specific to this, and you'll have an opportunity to respond really to any questions that commissioners might raise, and then we will close the public hearing. So please give us your ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you, first of all, for having me. My name is John McNally. I'm a partner in Pike Properties. This property came to us from the owner, the previous owner of the property, presented us to us. He's the one who put the idea in our head of townhomes there. So we did look at the property, look at the neighborhood, talk to the building department here, and investigate into the, the zoning and everything. I think the 3-unit building that we're asking for fits the whole neighborhood and will bring good things to Elmhurst.
Do you want to add anything or elucidate anything on any of the points, or I mean, we all read this, but if there's anything you wanted to highlight at all, you can, or else not. You don't have to.
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. Let me open this then for questions from commissioners. Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Rose. Yes, can you talk a little bit about the stormwater plan, please?
So we've had some discussions with the engineering in the city here. So we're still looking into a few things with some permeable things with the driveway and things like that. Our current design is calling for a dry well in the back to take a significant amount of the stormwater that would, because we're obviously building on more than what's there today. So there are a few options being kicked around with discussions with the engineering department here to find the best solution.
Okay, so that plan really isn't finalized yet, but it may include permeable paver driveway.
Yeah, something. I don't think we've got a final decision made on that, but we're looking into those options.
Okay, And then, did you receive any comments from neighbors when they were notified? Any feedback or anything from the neighbors?
We did not. We actually mailed out around 200 letters, and we hosted a meeting here in City Hall, and we had nobody attend.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I want to piggyback on that question that Commissioner Snyder asked about that, because I did notice that the impervious surface is increasing significantly. And that is really true. So I guess my question is to Eileen. So if they use pervious pavers, does that count in the impervious surface, or can you just please give us an idea of what that's considered?
So I believe that pervious pavers do not count as an impervious surface, provided they are truly pervious pavers and, have a certain amount of gravel underneath. The applicant is in for permit already. So our engineering department has actually started a true review of the project.
So I guess I'm asking then that this percentage of impervious cover may change. It may be reduced. It's at 41% now. They expect it will go to 72%, but if they use pervious pavers, permeable pavers, that number might be reduced then. Is that what would happen?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Burns, you had a question?
Yes, for the applicant. And this is along stormwater lines. So in the package, I could look at this, I suppose, a blow up in board docs, but here's your site plan. And so I do see that there's a very specific dry well depicted and certain quantities expressed. So have you retained a civil engineer yourself who designed this for you?
That is correct. And he worked off the calculations that the engineering department has put forth for that lot coverage, the impervious versus new versus old. And that's how he designed the size and of that dry well. It was only after we submitted that with discussions with the engineering department here that they felt that maybe a little bit the pervious driveways might reduce the size of that dry well and work out a little bit better. So that's why we're in discussions with them about maybe possibly including those.
Okay, so it sounds like engineers, like Elmhurst Engineering, and Eileen, maybe you can confirm this, has already done the runoff curves and so forth that would be required to determine the required storage volume, given the site size and the other aspects of the site that the engineers use to determine that.
So I can't speak to exactly what they've done, but this particular project was something that we realized when it already came in for permit needed to go through the plan development process. So our plan reviewer is the one who brought it to our attention. So our engineers were actually, a little different than some of our other plan developments where there's sort of a preliminary review. This was actually already under like an official review with engineering. So I would suspect that they did do those analysis already.
Okay, because my question, this is back to the applicant, if you know the answer to this question, is whether the depictions of stormwater volumetric collection and infiltration, all the other things shown in your site plan that I just held up to my camera, were designed by your civil engineer based on information supplied by Elmhurst engineers.
That is correct.
Okay.
Those calculations are put together based on a table that was provided by City of Elmhurst.
Okay, well, that gives me some confidence then if there were further changes that they would also be done along the same lines. I had another question. There's a statement that there will be considerable off-street parking. And how much off-street parking will there be and where will it be located?
So currently the structure that's there now has 3 single garage building right on the alley in the back. ours are gonna be connected to two-car garages with actually like a tandem, maybe two small cars could fit. I don't think two large vehicles. Indoor parking, and then a driveway behind that that would accommodate 3 to 4 additional vehicles, which that is not the case currently.
And it 3 to 4 more per,
Unit, yes.
okay. And then the last question I have, I did pull up the feasibility plan that Emily just referred to. Do you have a pricing plan at this point for your townhouses?
Well, we did, and then with the current state of construction at the moment, like we're kind of in review on that. I mean, we're going to be around the 900K mark. When we did our due diligence with the neighboring ones and the ones down the street, we felt that was a good number to be around. We kind of have to look at all the numbers now. I mean, we're going to be, within 10 to 15,000 of that, one way or the other. But we do think the 2 end units have a bigger desirable sticker price than the one in the middle. So like that one might be a little less and the other 2 might be a little bit more, but somewhere in that 900K neighborhood.
Okay. All right. That's all I had. Thank you very much.
Other commissioners, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thanks, Chair Rose. This piggybacks on Eileen's comments from earlier. If I understand this correctly, what's triggering the PUD is strictly based upon where this development is located. So being in the neighborhood transition district and the fact that there's 75 feet or more of frontage, correct?
That is correct.
So if I understand this correctly, that would mean if they weren't in the neighborhood transition district or in any of the development downtown districts, this would just go through a normal permitting process.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. A couple additional questions for the applicant. So standard 8 of the plan unit development revolves around performance. Can you talk to any type of projected schedule on this project?
I mean, obviously approvals have a big significant thing to do with that. And then the winter coming on, our goal was to deliver these like in May of 2022. So we intended to start towards the end of August, early September, and work in an 8 to 9 month period there to have them completed.
Okay, thank you. The landscape plan that was added to board docs today references a future retaining wall and driveway by others. I'm assuming that that's just because that's not in the scope of that vendor?
That is correct.
Okay, great. And then one last question, the report of soil investigation. In that report, it references, the scope and essentially states that it's recommended that a representative from Illinois Drilling and Testing be present during the footing excavation. Do you plan on following that recommendation?
I don't know. Well, like we really haven't considered that. I guess I missed that part in there because their report, and when I was out there with them doing the drilling, like he was telling me we were at the required PSI at like a foot. So
it just references the limited scope of the investigation. And I guess it leads me to the last question. They reference possible remedial measures. Do you have any idea what those remedial measures would be? And if they'd put the project in jeopardy?
I don't believe so. I think that is just wording that they include in every single report they probably submit out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. I think given the events that occurred recently in Florida, we're all concerned about structure and the soil. That's on everyone's mind. And I thought that myself when I looked at this report of soil investigation. Everyone, I think, is a little touchy on that one too. So any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Uditsky.
Thank you, Chair Rose. So I have one question for staff and then another question that I'm not sure if it would be appropriate during the public hearing or perhaps during deliberation, so you'll let me know. Eileen, do you know how the lot coverage on this property would compare to the property to the south, the 4-unit development there?
So I think it will be, from what I recall, this is neighborhood transition and townhomes are allowed to go to either 40 or 50%. 50%, right, Emily?
I can double check that.
But I believe that the townhomes to the south, I believe, are at the maximum proposed coverage.
And so my question about whether it's appropriate for deliberation or not, Chair Rose, could you perhaps remind me what is the general standard that we've followed all these years in terms of lot coverage?
%30 in residential.
So do we, with a PUD, evaluate that differently then?
It would be different because it is a different, when we redid this kind of core of the city and had this neighborhood transition, that's when the lot coverage changed at that point for this type of construction.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And you were correct, Eileen, 50% is the code for neighborhood transition.
For townhomes, but if someone was to construct a
right.
single family home, it would be 30,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, so it's for this type of construction in this particular zoning category. So they will be at the maximum for that. Commissioner Burns.
It's a kind of a follow-up question, since Commissioner Hoffman had mentioned the performance standard for the applicant. Could you tell us about a few of the other projects you've done and how they progressed, you know, the timing, your access to financing, capital, and those sorts of things, and labor?
So we've been building single family homes in Elmhurst I've been doing it personally since 2012. I work with my father's company who's been building in Elmhurst since the 80s. We try to, once we start, we go full steam ahead until we are fully completed, whether they are sold or not sold. We think a finished product is going to sell faster than an unfinished product. So a single family home, we're probably, from the time the shovel hits the ground till we're ready to close, is about 4.5 to 5 months, depending on the time of year. Obviously, winter months can move that a little bit longer.
Sorry, and then as far as access to financing, capital, you know, what the fuel for your projects in that sense?
So this project specifically is a partnership, Pike Properties LLC, which is going to be funded back by Itasca Bank. So we are in the process of securing that loan to go from where we are now to the finished product.
Okay, and have you experienced any issues with labor, finding people to do the work on these projects?
So lead times have been extended. We've used the same contractors for decades, so we're able to get the labor out, but they're struggling to find labor. So like plumbers and electricians are taking a little bit longer than they had in the past. So it's adding weeks and maybe a month to a project as opposed to not getting labor at all.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Pittman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I just had some questions for the applicant. One, is Itasca Bank going to require you to have 1 or 2 of these pre-sold before you start construction, or are they going to fund everything up front?
They're going to fund up front.
Okay, and then can you talk a little bit about the color scheme that you're going to use? What's it going to look like? Because you have a pretty similar design to what's next door. And I guess I'm just kind of curious what you're thinking for your project so that it kind of doesn't look exactly the same.
So we are going to have a masonry point to it and then siding. We're looking at probably doing a much lighter brick and then a darker siding with wood accents in the front of the building where the front room's kind of cantilever out 2 feet. We were going to do like some kind of wood kind of accents and stuff to give it a little different look.
Okay, and then the color scheme, you're not, is it gonna be gray and white or?
No, it's gonna be a dark gray on the top where the siding would be. All the siding would be dark gray, including like if you've seen a lot of the siding houses around, they have like white accents and stuff. Ours would all be the same color.
Okay.
And then the brick would be a lighter gray. And then the cantilevers would be like a brown wood accent.
Okay,
They also have a very modern like metal roof with chains coming down over the front doors. We're going with much more traditional metal roofs over the front door and those 2 cantilevers, or 3 actually, cantilevers.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none. I'm gonna ask about public testimony. Mike, in the public comment room, has anyone come in who would like to comment on this particular case?
No, there's not.
All right, we're going to go through the same process we did on general public comment. Eileen, have you received any voicemails from anyone who wishes to give testimony on this particular case?
So no emails, and Emily's checking voicemail right now.
Okay.
There are no voicemails for public comment.
All right. We will then close the public comment, public testimony section. I want to give the applicant one last opportunity. Are there any closing comments you want to make?
No, not really. I just respectfully hope that this would go to deliberations tonight.
You don't have to make any
Sorry.
closing comment. That's fine. You're not required. All right, we will then close the public hearing. It is our general protocol that unless a commissioner objects, we will move to deliberation on this evening. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the conditional use and PUD request and PUD request. Can I have a motion? Commissioner Hoffman moves, and a second. Commissioner Pittman seconds. Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. As I mentioned previously, I think this is a fairly straightforward planned unit development application. I'm going to walk through the 7 standards for conditional use, but based upon this being fairly simple, I'm going to lump a few of these together. So the first 3 conditional use standards, the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental to, endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare, nor will they be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood. Additionally, will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. So overall, I see this particular potential development as an improvement to the area. It's very similar to uses actually on Larch and throughout Elmhurst, specifically within the neighborhood transition zoning district. The proposed project conforms to existing zoning requirements and is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. So I think it clearly meets these three conditional uses. Standards 4 and 5, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and necessary facilities have been or are being provided, and adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. So essentially they're taking what is currently a 2-unit development and turning it into a 3-unit development utilizing existing roads. So no new access roads are required. They will provide adequate utilities, drainage, and the necessary facilities per code. And essentially the design is done in such a way as to minimize traffic congestion based upon the use of an existing alleyway to promote the primary means of ingress and egress to this development. So I think it clearly meets standards 4 and 5. Standards 6 and 7, the proposed conditional use is not contrary to the objectives of the current comprehensive plan, and the conditional use shall in all other respects conform to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located. So I think that they have demonstrated that this particular project does that. Again, it improves and makes improvements to the area, replaces an existing deteriorated structure that I guess one could argue has seen its useful life expire. And as mentioned previously, the proposed project conforms to all existing zoning requirements and is consistent with the city's vision for the future in terms of the comprehensive plan. In terms of the standards for plan unit development, there are 10 of those. The first is which I've already discussed is the conditional use permit standards. The second, from a city plan perspective, again, as mentioned previously, the proposed project does conform with existing zoning requirements. This particular project's a little bit further down the road than ones we typically see, just based upon the fact that it was submitted earlier and found during that submission process that it had to go through the PUD. Standard 3, from a public welfare perspective, the height and density of the proposed project, it's actually less than what is allowed per existing zoning ordinance. The plan development does not impact or impair adequate supply of light and or air to adjacent properties, and is very similar in nature to the particular property, as mentioned previously, to the south. From an impact on public facilities and resources perspective, again, it's a 3-unit townhome replacing what was 2 units. So you've got 1 in addition. So from an impact contribution perspective, that's minimal, but they will adhere to what's required from a permit approval process as is deemed reasonably by the city. There are no known archaeological, historical, cultural resource issues located on the parcel or off the parcel that's projected for development. Standard 6, from a parking and traffic perspective, the plan development has been designed. It will have minimal impact on the parking and traffic in the area based upon the location. One could, I think, argue persuasively that it will encourage walking, biking, the use of public transportation based upon its proximity to the downtown area. From a buffering perspective, standard 7, the proposed project does conform to existing zoning requirements, and that includes the 25-foot yard setback. So I think that standard has been met. Performance, we've talked a little bit about this with the applicant. It's going to conform to city code. I guess the applicant, much like others that are in the industry, is struggling with work issues, issues in regards to supply chain and that. But I think through the comparative market analysis that was completed, there's a definite need in the community with a current low supply and a high demand. So I think it behooves them to move this forward as quickly as is possible. From an appearance perspective, You know, we talked about the finishes and the materials being used, the brick veneer, the horizontal and vertical cement board siding, the seam metal roofing. I think all of that is in the look and feel of that particular area in the downtown area, and I think will fit in nicely. And then standard 10, which is signage, is not applicable based upon the fact that there are no proposed signs. So I think the applicant has met the standards, and I will be recommending this for moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pittman, would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Chair Rose. Thanks to Commissioner Hoffman. I think you did a great job going through everything. I agree. I think all the standards are met for the PUD and the conditional use. You know, I actually recall having a specific conversation with Dan Warner back when he was still at the city about this specific section of Larch and how it really needed to have some flexibility for some different types of options for townhomes or homes because of this sort of transition zone. So I think that, you know, when that neighborhood transition zone was created, it really opened up some opportunities for people to come in and do some unique things that appeal to people who maybe don't want the maintenance of a single family home, but do want a larger, very high-end property. And I think both the marketing report as well as things that we see going on in town fully support that these are in high demand. I think that they will do well, and I think they bring a lot of value to the city, both in offering people an alternative to a single family home and also just, you know, bringing more people into the downtown to support our businesses. So I do think this is a good use of that land and fully supported as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Pittman. Other commissioners, comments, questions, thoughts? Okay. I just have a few thoughts. You know, the current building that's on there, you know, that was, it's not really a non-conforming two flat, but when we had, you know, multiple housing, that was the only kind that was built, was that. And it's really what you see is that's just, it's really obsolete, that type of housing in terms of multifamily is just, it's no wonder it's deteriorated because it's simply not something that people want to invest in. So I think that seems clear to me. We're not going to see that. The thing I do like about this development, to be honest with you, is being able to put a lot of those parking behind each one of these units. So, you know, people don't live in these units by themselves. You know, they want to have a party, they want to have family over, et cetera. And where do you park? And you can just see in this city right now, many of, especially our streets that are closer to the downtown, are smaller streets. And if you start having people parking on those, it's just, I hear a lot from people that that's really difficult. So I really like the fact that it's not just parking for the residents, but there is some additional parking. I just think that really adds to the area, and I really appreciate that design feature of these in particular. So, other comments that commissioners wish to make on this? Okay, seeing none, I will close the deliberations and ask Eileen to please call the roll.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky,
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. The commission then will forward a recommendation to the Development Planning and Zoning Committee to approve this. As you are aware, it's a 3-stage process. We'll make that recommendation to DPZ. That's one of the standing committees of the city council. They'll review it again, probably for more policy-oriented issues. And then they will make a recommendation to the full city council. It's my hope that this moves along pretty efficiently and quickly. I understand your construction window is always short, but I think this is a good project, and I'm happy that the commission has unanimously agreed to recommend approval of it. So we wish you all the best. Eileen, can you give us an idea when this might go to DPZ?
We are hoping that it will go to DPZ Monday, but we will confirm that with the applicant tomorrow or Thursday.
That would be great. So hopefully this will move quickly. So please stay in contact with Eileen, and she'll let you know if indeed it's going to be scheduled on Monday for DPZ. And if they are efficient, which I'm sure they will be, and move it towards, perhaps it'll go to the city council within another week after that. So here's hoping. So good luck to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, Commissioner Uditsky?
Yeah, Churros, I appreciate it. Hey, before we move into the next one, I just had a question. I've noticed, kind of following up on what Commissioner Pittman had asked, that in a lot of the PUDs, that maybe it's because they're earlier on in the process, but it doesn't seem like we get color renderings in a lot of the PUD applications. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason for that. I know based on Commissioner Pittman's comments, I think myself as well, it really helps us to visualize what they're doing. Is there any reason for that? Is that something that we could recommend that, gets included in their application?
That's an excellent point, because I'm like you. I like to, I always laugh and say those renderings, it's always a sunny day in Elmhurst, the sky's blue, people are walking around with their dogs. It's always a perfectly lovely day. But I do miss the kind of color renderings of that. Eileen, is it just been a matter of course that applicants have not included that?
I think that's probably just happened with the last couple. We'll make sure to catch that ourselves and get the color renderings.
So we can recommend that. It's not required, but we want to recommend that. It's just easier to gauge what a project's going to look like in a community. So thank you, Commissioner Pittman, for bringing it up, and Commissioner Uditsky as well for also seconding that. So, okay, we come to the next case in front of us, and this is the case 21P10 King Transmission Conditional Use Permit with site development allowances. And I'm going to ask Eileen Franz, who is a project manager for this, to introduce this to us.
Thank you. As you stated, this is case number 21P10. The application was filed June 21st, 2021. The request is a conditional use permit for a combined preliminary and final plan development with site development allowances. The site development allowance in this case is from our parking requirements. The applicant is Joseph Parada. The property is in a trust, Chicago Title Land Trust number 16220, and Joseph Parada is one of the beneficiaries. The legal notice was published July 1st, 2021. The sign was posted July 2nd, 2021, and the mailing was sent out July 2nd, 2021. Just before we have the applicant give their presentation, I do want to just comment on this one. This is a planned development. Given the nature of the request, we did waive many of the application requirements because the applicant is just constructing a 3,700 square foot addition to an existing business that has been there since 1979. So we didn't feel that they needed to submit all of the application requirements that are required for a plan development. So we did waive quite a few of them. Also, the addition is going to be taking place on existing impervious surface. So engineering, has done a cursory review, and when the permit is filed, we'll review, but there won't be stormwater requirements that necessarily come into play for this project because it is going on to existing impervious.
Thank you for that. I just want to check if the applicants, were all of you sworn in when the other case was at?
Yes, Madam Chairperson.
Everyone was sworn in. Okay, excellent. So I would just then like to hand it over to you to give us an idea of what it is that you want to do, and as well as give us some idea about the site development allowance that I know it is around parking that you're requesting, and it would be great if you spent a little time talking about that as well. So.
Sure, absolutely. For the record, my name is Marshall Subach, S-U-B-A-C-H. I'm an attorney with Hunt and Subach in Bensonville, and I represent the petitioner, who is Joe Parada and King Transmission. Joe is sitting here to my right. Also here is Mike Latoria of Latoria Brothers Construction. He's the general contractor. We have Cliff Toberman, who is the engineer, and then Bob Seaback, who is the architect for the project. I asked staff to adjust the camera. I'm looking about 20 pounds heavier for this meeting. So if I lean back, don't take it personally. It's not, it's just trying to get myself to look a little more presentable for the board, okay?
I've asked him to please adjust the camera so we all look a little like 20 pounds lighter, but it hasn't been terribly effective yet. So good
Understood.
luck.
This property is at 180 West Grand Avenue in Elmhurst. The petitioner has been located in Elmhurst since 1979. King Transmission is a destination business. Individuals and businesses from all around the state come to King Transmission right in Elmhurst to do work on their vehicles. The petitioner is seeking to build an addition of 3,720 square feet in the business. And on the rear of the building, we're seeking approval of the PUD and the conditional use permit to allow for the addition and the deviation. The deviation arises from parking. We're going to have 99 parking spaces available. The code requires 157 parking spaces. That's primarily because of the size of the existing building. The new plan adds 13 parking spaces. So the deviation, or I still call it a variance, is looking for 75 or 57 less spaces. The project's not your typical PUD. The reason we're here is because the site is over 2 acres and it fell into your little larger PUD net that you have. Staff's been great to work with and has really been helpful in helping guide us through the PUD process. The existing building is about 17,000 square feet. The addition again will be 3,720 square feet. We're going to be adding 4 new bays for additional work and additional indoor storage. The plan includes 13 additional parking stalls. All the mechanical work done at King Transmission is done inside. There's no outside work that's done. The building will be of masonry construction with the addition of many windows to allow for increased natural lighting. The property falls in the C3 zoning district for general commercial. There's C3 both to the east and the west. The south is in your I1 industrial district. And then the north is the village of Bensonville. The developer will meet all the setback requirements. We had no objections at the concept plan meeting. As far as a timeline, after we hopefully get approval from the process, we'll be finishing the engineering drawings and having the engineering be finalized. This is going to be self-financed, so there's no financing contingency. And we're looking for hopefully a spring construction to start. Still dependent on hopefully the pandemic settles down and materials and labor shortages shore up a little bit to bring some of those costs down. But where the ideal would be a spring construction. I think it's going to be a positive impact on the neighboring businesses. This is really business retention. the business wants to expand and they want to stay in Elmhurst and be able to function there for a long time. As far as the standards for conditional use, if the Madam Chairwoman, if you want me to go over all those standards, that's typically how I do my presentation. I saw that Commissioner Hoffman in the last presentation did them. I can go over each of the standards and let you know how I think we meet them, whatever your preference is.
That's up to you. You can do that if you would like. It's up to
Sure.
you.
Sure. So, the first standard is whether or not the operation of the business will be detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare. King Transmission has been a model corporate citizen in Elmhurst since 1979. There's been no issues with this business, and they want to stay in town. The next factor is whether or not it's going to diminish property values in the area. It's certainly not going to do that. There have been some vacancies along the Grand Avenue corridor there over at times. Right now, I think it's pretty much all occupied, and we're going to be keeping this site occupied by allowing for the development to go through. The next factor is whether or not it's going to impede development of the surrounding properties. The other surrounding properties are of automotive uses and automobile sales. They're already fully developed, so approving this PUD is not going to affect, or approving the conditional use will not affect the long-term development of those other properties. The next condition is whether or not you're going to have adequate access. This property has 2 ingress and egress curb cuts along Grand Avenue, so there are not going to be any issues with increased traffic or problems or any adversely affect the drainage or utilities. The addition is going to be built on the existing impervious surface, and we're going to push all the water we can to the village of Bensonville. So from the attorney's point of view, the engineer might tell me differently. As far as ingress and egress, again, there's 2 curb cuts along Grand Avenue. The development's going to meet the comprehensive plan. Every comprehensive plan, including Elmhurst, talks about being flexible with the businesses and keeping business retained in town, which you're going to do by this approval. We will meet the best practices as far as any stormwater requirements and meet all the other code requirements for the village or the city of Elmhurst. As far as the PUD standards, those again are the approvals for the conditional use that I just went over. It also whether or not it meets the general policies and planning of Elmhurst and comprehensive plan, which it does. The next factor is whether or not it's going to affect the supply of light and air for the adjacent properties. The existing building is 1 story and the addition is going to be that same 1 story. So it's not even going to be visible from Grand Avenue because it's behind the existing building. The next factor is whether or not there be any negative impact on public facilities and infrastructure, which there will not be. It will not have any impact on historical or cultural resources in Elmhurst. There will be no negative impact on parking. The site has more than adequate parking right now. With the 2 curb cuts, they're able to bring vehicles in. Parking has never been an issue with the number of spaces they have already, and they're adding an additional 13 spaces. How many employees do you typically have? 25. So 25 employees. So there's plenty of parking in the rear of the building. If you've ever been by the building during operational hours, there's always parking. Most of the work is by scheduling of the work. And so they know whether or not there's not a whole lot of outside storage that goes on for scheduling of the residential or the commercial work. As far as the other factor, it's whether or not there's adequate buffering. There's fencing on both to the east and the west of the property that has buffering. And then there's natural screening, quite dense landscaping along the south side of the property towards the industrial zoning in Elmhurst. The next factor is whether or not they're going to be moving forward. And again, the time frame is that they are hopeful to move forward with a spring construction schedule. And then the last factor is we're going to match the existing building materials. So there'd be no change as far as that. On the deviation for parking, again, we need 157 spaces. We're going to provide 99. So it's a deviation or variance of 58. And that really becomes because of the size of the existing building. So I won't bore you with the factors for the deviation, but submitted in the packet are all those standards, and we certainly meet those standards, and they overlap with the PUD standards. In summary, more than a PUD or conditional use, this is really about business retention and keeping a long-standing business in the city of Elmhurst. This might not be as sexy as a Buffalo Wild Wings in your downtown area, but believe it or not, they are a sales tax producer for the city of Elmhurst. They're a destination business. So people that drop their cars off here or do work here, they go to Buffalo Wild Wings for lunch. They spend money in Elmhurst. And so that's a positive thing on the community. So with that, we're ready to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Let me first ask commissioners, questions from any of our commissioners. Commissioner Burns?
Thank you. So one question about parking, and this is partly for the applicant, and then Eileen, if you could clarify the question I have following up. So for the applicant, the front part of the lot, I would say about the front 3/4 or something like that, includes paved area. As you go back toward the back of the lot, then it's not asphalt paved. You've got like gravel paving going back to the rear fence. And when I was out there, I noticed there are a number of vehicles parked back there. And in the very back, there were like bags of rock salt and other items that seemed like they've been there a long time. What is that area used for right now?
Right now, there was one tenant, a longtime friend of one of my partners. It has a landscaping company that has been there. Once this is approved, we're cleaning house. So that's one of the reasons why we want to get everything reset back there and get it to look nice and refocus kind of what we're doing here. It's one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. So just to follow up on what you said, clean house, will that mean that there will be fewer? I was out there this morning. So will there be fewer of those vehicles or even any parked back there?
Correct.
Okay, so there
will be fewer.
Okay, that'll be opened up. So Eileen, I have a question about parking. They have 86 parking spaces, which are striped asphalt paved spaces. And I looked around our ordinance, and maybe I didn't look well enough. What is the definition of a parking space that satisfies parking requirements in our code?
So I would say the storage area in the back would not satisfy our code. They are not on paved surfaces. It's not like a proper parking area. So we would be, to satisfy our code, it would be the 86 parking spaces that are striped and then the 13 that they are proposing.
Okay, so what would they have to do to that rear area to create parking spaces?
They would have to pave it.
With asphalt or concrete?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, because I looked, it's about 32,000 square feet. I just scaled off the drawing. And if you went with a normal ratio, I mean, just to make a round number, 320 square feet per space, including drive aisles, you'd get about 100 more spaces back there. But they'd have to do all the improvements if they really needed it.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pittman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I just had a couple of questions. You had mentioned you had about 25 employees that come to the site. Would that increase based on this new building that you're putting in with the new bays? Or will you be keeping the 25 employees?
The 25 employees is actually for both of our shops. We also have one by Grant and Pulaski in Chicago. So on this one, we have 17 employees. We don't anticipate maybe one or two more, but pretty much employee-wise, we should be pretty set. We really need the space for the downtime we have while we wait for new parts, and having a car tying up a lift for as long as it does, we really need more space in that sense. Then we need more workers to work on active jobs. We basically need more space to handle just the increase, in the supply chain problems we have with getting parts. Everything's taking longer, not just in construction, but definitely in automotive as well. So that's another reason why we're doing what we're doing. So I don't anticipate maybe one more employee, but it's really done more for space than it is on an employee end.
Okay, and your employees are the primary user of the exterior spaces right now, and maybe, a handful of people coming in to drop their car off as they're waiting to get inside?
Correct.
And then the letter that was written from your attorney mentioned that most of the vehicles get parked indoors at night. How many cars can be accommodated indoors?
Probably around 20, 25.
Okay. All right, very good. That's all the questions that I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Snyder and then Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. Yes, Commissioner Pittman primarily touched on the questions I had about parking, but maybe you can just clarify a little bit more in terms of your business operations. Like maybe walk me through when a customer comes in, are customers using those outdoor parking places? Like, is it, are you using that for cars that are complete and waiting for pickup? Like what's, with the 99 spaces, 25 employees, that's a lot of additional parking. So I just want to better understand your day-to-day operation and parking needs and how this will meet that.
Yeah, generally somebody comes in the front. We'll, if it's a retail customer and not a commercial customer, they'll come in through the front. We'll test drive the car. If they decide to leave it, we kind of have a flow. The cars that need to be worked on are kept on the, usually on the east side, and that's also where that's kind of where the cars that we work on, or the ones we're about to work on, go to. Then after we work on them, they get test driven again. Once it's confirmed that it's fixed properly, then it goes to the west side, and that's usually where they go to pick it up. The west side of the property, which is the larger parking area we have now, is also where our employee parking and that sort of thing. So there is kind of a revolving flow that goes on.
And over what period of time does that occur? Is that on a daily basis, or might cars be there a couple of days? Do you have like fleet?
Yeah, generally, we're generally done within 3 to 5 days. And we've always been closer to 3 days. Nowadays, it's been closer to 5. But there's constant flow though. There's a constant flow. There's never, they're always in transition. Nothing really sits more than a day or two. So it's kind of like the post office. It just keeps on coming in and going out.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in terms of the 4 new bays that this addition will accommodate, if I understand correctly, it's not so that you can work on the cars simultaneously. You can't expand simultaneous work. You were saying that you wanted to be able to leave a car in progress as it is because of logistics delays or whatever, and be able, so it's not, you won't be needing additional employees as a result. So is that right? It's more to accommodate more projects in progress rather than.
Exactly. And it reduces employee downtime. A lot of times we try not to do it, but it does happen when parts don't come in on time, or when you get something different, you have to find something else for someone to do for a while. And this would definitely reduce that time and definitely make it more efficient.
Okay, and then pre-pandemic, was that an issue you had with delays as well? I'm just trying to figure out if this is a, pandemic-induced problem you're having, or, long-term. It looks like it would provide you with the flexibility to hire even more employees and work on more cars simultaneously. But the delays, is that something that you experienced pre-pandemic as well? So do you expect that to be a standard condition of how you're
Well,
using?
You know, it's not standard until it becomes it. So no, it was never this bad before. Who knows what's going to happen? I would love to say that parts could come in as fast as they used to, and that, you know, we could pump more sales, and I would love to hire 3, 4, 5 new guys, or, you know, whoever. That'd be a great problem to have. But you know, I'm very conservative and cautious when I look at it, and I'm always afraid to be too optimistic about things. So the way I'm looking at it is, we need the space right now. If it turns out that we could turn these things around like we used to, even better. That'd be a great problem. I hope to have that problem.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Hoffman, you had a question.
Thanks, Chair Rose. Gets back to parking. And if I'm doing the math correctly, with the building area of 17,000 and a lot area of 104 currently, with 5 per 1,000 for gross floor area and 1 per 2,000 for gross land area, you need 138 parking spaces to support your current business. So I'm assuming you're grandfathered in. So you're essentially 52 spaces short today. And by increasing your building square footage by the 3,700 square feet, you only increase that deficit by 6. So I guess the point I'm trying to make with this is you've survived for 40 plus years with the deficit. So I'm assuming that what you're basically stating is it's not an issue. Additionally, the 40 plus years of being in business on that site, and the majority of the folks surrounding you being vehicular in nature, are those you know, people who use your business?
Oh yeah, are you saying we've done overflow work for every dealer on the block?
So would you say
everybody down the street and then some?
Great. So your relationship with the neighbors is good, because I'm just getting to, you know, you had the neighborhood meeting, you also sent out additional letter requests and that, no responses from them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and I didn't anticipate any. We have a good working relationship with everyone that's been around us. And, you know, we were the first ones there. Well, I guess there was Long Chevrolet and there was Elmhurst Lincoln Mercury, and then the bank at the corner. Other than that, it was farmland all the way to Lake Street.
Okay.
No Keebler factory, you know, the good old days. So,
sure.
Yeah.
One last question for you. You mentioned in the 3,700 square foot addition, you're going to add 4 bays. How many bays do you currently have in the 17,000 square foot building?
We have 12 plus 1 inspection lift.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from commissioners? Okay. Seeing none, then I'm going to ask both Eileen and Emily to look and see, have we had any emails from anyone who wishes to give public testimony on this case? Or have we had any voicemails from anyone who wishes to give public testimony on this case? Eileen?
No emails.
We'll wait for Emily to let us know any voicemails.
There are no voicemails for public comment.
Thank you. Thank you for checking on that. Let me give the applicant, do you want to, any last words? You're not required to, but if you would like to sum up any last words, just let me know.
Thank you. Just want to say that we're looking forward to getting this project moving forward, and it's not your typical PUD, but I do think we meet all the approval criteria for both the conditional use, the PUD, and for the deviation for the parking. And we thank you for your time.
Yeah, and then lastly, I just want to add, you know, obviously we would have the option to get a bigger building that could maybe serve things better at a lower cost somewhere else. But I mean, ever since my dad bought the place, and I remember painting over the sign when I was 6 years old, we painted over the for sale sign on it. This has been home. We don't like moving, and we'd just like to keep it here.
That's a great memory.
It is.
Thanks for that. So, okay. We will then close the public hearing at this point. And as is our usual practice, we would like to move straight into deliberation unless there is any of the commissioners wish to not do that. So, before we do, I just want to make sure I did not ask. I said I closed it. I'm not going to close it. I have one question, which is, Mike, I needed to ask you if there's anyone in the public comment room who wants to make public testimony around this particular case.
No, there is not.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing at this point. And we'll move on to deliberation. So what I would like is a motion and a second to approve the request for conditional use plan unit development with site allowances. So can I have a motion to approve and a second? Commissioner Burns moves, and a second. Commissioner Uditsky seconds. All right, Commissioner Burns.
Thank you, Chair Rose. All right, this will be a little different format of presentation unless we decide it should be a little different. I'm basically going to refer to the fact that Mr. Subak recited the conditional use standards and the plan development standards, and having heard those, having heard the commissioner's questions and the answers to them and to my own questions, the main observation is that really nothing is changing zoning wise. I'm holding the parking apart for a second, but as far as the building quantity, setbacks, impervious area, the use, it's all the same. So from that perspective, I believe that all of those conditional use standards, the 7, and then the subsequent plan development standards have all been illustrated to have been met. And in my opinion, they are met. However, Mr. Subak didn't go through didn't recite the site development allowance modification standards. And those refer to the parking. I think the parking is really the highlight issue of this case, if anything is. So I'll go through those. And I'll preface this by saying that even though it seems like kind of a technicality that this property came in as a PUD because of the site area and so forth, because of the parking allowance, this really does give us flexibility in talking about what do they really need for parking. We do have 30 plus, I forget the exact number, of parking categories, right, in the ordinance. You can go through them all. And within each category, sometimes there's dozens or scores. We get into double and triple small letters of the types of uses that are within each parking class. But even with all that, we can't necessarily capture every unique situation that requires parking. So we've heard the testimony from the applicant. We went out there, looked at the property. We understand better now how they use the property and what the parking requirements are. So having said that, I'll look at the modification standards for the site development allowance. First, that there's an integrated design. And in this case, it's pretty straightforward. There's going to be another one-story brick addition to the building. Obviously, it'll look a little newer from the outside, but otherwise, from the drawings that were presented, it's going to be just another larger building. Same sort of building. It's going to be put to the same use, pretty much, and it will be an integrated use. So this standard is met. Beneficial common open space. There's really no open space. We don't have like a river walk along Grand Avenue. So there's no common space here. So this issue is really kind of moot. So it's met. Location of higher buildings. There's no height issue here. The existing height is not going to be exceeded. The building addition will be behind, away from Grand Avenue. So there's no problem there. So I believe that standard's met. Fourth, functional and mechanical features. I do like the fact that the applicant said that they're going to sort of clean up the site. The front of the property looks pretty good, it looks fine. It's really the back that needs to be cleaned up. And the way they've described what they'll do with the addition indicates that it will be fully functional mechanically and otherwise. So that standard is met. Visual and acoustical privacy. The work goes on inside the building. I don't know how if transmission work is thought to be particularly noisy. Obviously, you've got tools that make some noise, but again, you're inside, and Grand Avenue is a busy street. So I don't believe that the acoustical privacy is an issue. And then visually, it's just part of the streetscape of Grand Avenue. They do have fencing around. It's more visible from the property to the west than it is to the east, but I believe that that standard is met. So then sixth, we have the standard for sustainable best practices. And we just, looking at the architectural design that was submitted, in the way they described it, we assume that's going to be met. Landscape conservation, there's going to be no change in the landscaping. There's no indication there'll be landscaping around the rear addition. I wouldn't expect it to be for a sort of a service commercial use like this. And to go back to the main issue with the variation that we're looking at for parking, they do actually have plenty of area to put vehicles, whether they're trailers or vehicles that would be sitting there for a longer time for whatever reason, out on that gravel area. I understand that technically by our code that it would have to be asphalt or concrete paved in order to count that as parking area. And there's no reason for us to require the applicant to go through the cost of installing that. But I do think that's a mitigating factor. They've got 3/4 of an acre back there where they actually, in practice, could put vehicles. So that takes off any pressure from whether they have enough parking with the 86 or 99 spaces that they propose. So I think it's a good plan. I think they meet all the standards, and I'm glad they're looking to do this and stay in Elmhurst for another, how many years? We don't know, but hope it's a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. Commissioner Udisky.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rose. So first, I just want to say to Mr. Subak, it's good to see you in person after emailing back and forth the last couple of weeks on a completely unrelated matter, but good to put a face with the name. I agree. I think Commissioner Byrne did a great job going through this as usual. I'll just reiterate with respect to the parking, which is what the real issue, here, and certainly, the parking's not automatic. Part of our job is to listen, to learn, and to make a recommendation based on that. But, after learning about the petitioner's business and the use, the number of employees, it seems that there's, even as is, there's plenty of parking there. So I don't think it's something that really is of concern. And as Commissioner Byrne indicated, in the event they had to, for some reason, put more parking there, it seems like that could be accommodated. So I think they did a great job, great presentation, and I'm fully in favor of of approval here.
Thank you very much. Any other commissioner have comments? Yeah, I would like to say that obviously the issue is the parking and you know, when I read this at first, I mean, I just thought 157 parking places seems absurd to me. So, and this is a business that has operated for 40 years. They understand their parking needs. As far as I know, we've had no complaints about where else would people park? If it's in their best interest to have adequate parking. If they don't have adequate parking, if they're not doing a good job with that, their customers are going someplace else. Where are they going to park? They're just not going to go there. So I think we have to rely in this instance on what their experiences have been with parking, and adding the 4 additional bays is not going to make that much difference because they're not looking to increase their business. Although I always wish for any business that, you know, that their businesses grow for them. So I think Commissioner Burns rightly states that if necessary, they have space to expand that already. And I don't see any reason to ask them to expend that kind of money at this point when we have no indication that they have inadequate parking at this point. In fact, we have every indication that their parking is more than adequate for their business. So I think that this is a very good plan. And I absolutely will support this as well. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay. I will then ask Eileen if she will call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. So we will be forwarding a positive recommendation to the Development Planning and Zoning Committee. And you could see and we're going to be talking about this very shortly. You could say, as in that first case, well, we only made it a PUD because it's of where it is and the 75-foot frontage. And you could say the same thing about this case. Really, it's only a PUD because of it goes beyond our 2-acre limit. But I also think there's some real value in looking at this. It's interesting that both of these cases had neighborhood meetings and nobody showed up. In this instance, I think silence probably indicates that people have no problem with it. So it will go to DP&Z, the committee of the full city council. And Eileen, do we think that will go on Monday as well?
I hope, that's what we hope. We'll confirm with the applicant in the next couple of days.
Yeah. And this one, I understand, does not have as much of a time pressure. I understand their desire. They will not be looking to break ground on this, it looks like, until spring. I love the practicality of waiting until building materials go down in price. Apparently, they're already starting to go down. So I think that's a very practical move. So if this doesn't go on Monday, I'd like to get it through in an efficient manner, but I don't think the pressure is on necessarily to do it so that they can break ground within the next 30 days. So, but we wish you all
get
the
paid at the end of when it's approved though. So if you don't mind the attorney few eyes, we'd like to get it approved as soon as possible. The general contractor can wait, but I've got a couple of kids in college and tuition. So the sooner the better, Madam Chairwoman.
With no prejudice, I'd like to say, spoken like a true lawyer. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we will move this along as efficiently as we can. And good luck to you in your business. You've always run a great business, and good luck. I think it's going to be a really good addition for you. So wish you all the best success.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Great. Thank you. Okay. We are now going to move on to our next item of business, which is, I'm actually really glad we've had these two PUDs. This is a good tip-off for our next item of business, which is really a review of our PUD ordinance, which went into effect, I always say, about 2 years ago. Is that correct, Eileen? It's been
Not
2 years?
quite, but close to 2 years.
Yeah, it seems like that. So
Getting closer.
getting close. So, we discussed this last time we met, and the city staff did a great presentation for us about that. And my goal for tonight is that I know they've made some changes to that. And Eileen, do you want to do that presentation again or just show the changes that you made into that?
Yes. Yeah, we have the presentation, but we can kind of fast forward to the.
Okay, so she'll show that again. And then I think what I'd like to have come out of our discussion are some concrete suggestions people have or thoughts about. I'm going to ask you to close your microphone, Eileen. I'm getting some feedback. There you go. Concrete suggestions, where we want to go with this. I'm really a real advocate of incremental change. So I think this ordinance has served us by and large better than what we had previously. But I also think we want to look at some ways we can make it better. So we're not looking to completely throw out the baby with the bathwater here, but we're looking for suggestions to make this a better ordinance. The next step on this would be city staff will take this and then come back to us with a draft of the ordinance that would include redlining and incorporating suggestions that we might have. And so the next time we discuss this, we'll have something in front of us to look at, to react to, and then we will move it forward to the full council. So that's where we go with this. So Eileen, I'm going to ask you to show that and kind of fast forward through what we've already seen and then look at the modifications you've made so far.
Thank you. So actually, Emily is handling the PowerPoint. So I'm going to, just quickly go through these first few slides as we discussed last time. So Chair Rose, you're correct. It is 2 years. It was spring of 2019. We've had, I guess, now we are 12 in process, 1 pending, as opposed to when we did this presentation before. You can go to the next slide. This is the intent and purpose. You can keep going. Here's just a list of our planned developments. You can go through these quickly, Emily. So these are the requirements for a mandatory PUD. Next slide. Definition of development. So here, Susan, can you mute? Thank you. So initially, our proposed changes to start the discussion at the last meeting are the text in bold on the screen right now. Since then, we made a little change to this one saying, in addition, a newly constructed building or an addition greater than 10,000 square feet or increases the floor area ratio by more than 50% in the downtown central business core, outer core residential, and we're keeping the strike through in the neighborhood transition, which is the townhome project that we had this evening. So that is something for discussion tonight. If this is something you think we should move forward with, or if you have any other suggestions on how we should change the trigger for the downtown area, or if we should change it at all.
Okay. All right, these are the proposed changes. The next slide is.
So the next slide then is for areas outside of downtown. So this would be changing it to greater than 25,000 square feet or increasing the floor area ratio by more than 50% on a greater than 5 acre property as opposed to a 2 acre property. And then the next one. So we had talked about the appeal process, having the Planning and Zoning Commission waive the requirement of a plan unit development. So we, based on the previous discussion at the last meeting, we're thinking this may not be something that's needed. I think Commissioner Burns has his hand up.
Yes, I would agree with that because I'm just thinking in terms of the logistics. If somebody comes in and says, well, the zoning standards trigger a PUD for this, but then how would we look at it in order to say, oh, no, don't do a PUD, just do a regular zoning presentation? Well, we wouldn't know that until we saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Then it'd have to go back to the applicant because they'd have to revise their presentation. So it just seems like an unnecessary back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also have some concern about that. I just, the sense of, so we're gonna waive it. I mean, what's the decision making? What is the standards we would use to waive that? Why would we waive that? I want to make sure it's very transparent so we're not doing it because we favor a particular developer or development. So, I mean, I think we have to have some clear criteria for that.
Okay.
So waiving, it's okay, but I want to have some criteria for that.
So then here's some additional information on like what we were considering more of the cleanup items, the order of the pre-meetings, staff meeting, public meeting, DPZ, clarifying the relationship of the site development allowances to the modification standards, additional information in the preliminary architectural submittal, requiring height from both grade and finished floor. We can include color renderings in here to make sure that we always have that.
I would include that. Yep. Okay. I would think let's do that.
And then for some of our projects, we have, as we've gone through the process, when the applicant then files for a building permit, we have realized that it might have been helpful to have some additional higher level engineering submittal as part of the PUD process. So we would like to include that as well. Commissioner Burns.
Question on that. So going back to the first plan development, 21 P09 that we heard on Larch, would there be any impediment or any reason not to post the engineering calculation document or whatever they had developed to board docs so that we could look at it and consider it versus sort of trying to call this out from the applicant, like what did you do and what did it look like? And if we had something that said, here's what it'll look like, then in our deliberation process, it might add more, a little more substance, a little more reliability that, we actually saw what the engineer calculated and required.
So that is a great question. And that is something we've talked about ourselves because we, the way our just sort of internal process works here, typically for a zoning case, they have to go through this process before someone files for an application. And with the PUDs, we have been going to our engineers. I feel like sometimes we're maybe going to them, interrupting the flow of their other work because we have a PUD and we need them to do this preliminary engineering review. So we've already talked about how we need to work on our internal process here to incorporate them so that we're not kind of catching them off guard when we have a particular plan unit development. So I think that's something that we can work with our engineers on as we try and improve our internal process to get more of a document from them, maybe that shows that, gives sort of a summary of the review that they have done already. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
other items, Eileen, that you're got, or is this the last slide?
This is, yeah.
So let's go back to some of the where you first started adding some of the items you wanted us to consider.
Okay,
Proposed changes, the one right before this.
before this, yeah.
Okay, so any thoughts on this? I think pulling out the neighborhood transition district makes a lot of sense to me. So anyone else have any ideas, or is this, would have objection to this type of proposed change?
Part of our discussion there, Susan, was that 10,000 square feet. This is the downtown district. Is that the right number? You know, this goes back to, we said 50%, and Commissioner Burns brought up the 1% of Bezos' wealth. Percentage could make a big difference depending on the size of the project. For instance, McMaster Car would not have met the 50% lot coverage or FAR, but it's a huge project. So is the number the right number, in your guys' opinion, I guess, is what we just threw 10,000 square feet out there as a starting point per se. Is that, we got to think about downtown development, 10,000 square feet is a fairly large number, but is it the right number?
Well, that's a good question. Tell me, how many square feet was McMaster Car? And then how many square feet is the parking deck on Addison?
So McMaster Car was 1 million square feet prior to their addition. They added 440,000 square feet on there. So it was about a 44% increase in the FAR. The Addison deck, I think it's around 200 by 150, somewhere in that neighborhood, right around there. So a 30,000 square foot parcel. Lennar parcel is a 1 acre parcel. That's 44,000 square feet. But I mean, depending on, I mean, FFC is a 22,000 square foot parcel. You know, that varies all over the place. I mean, I think the building right next to City Hall is around 9,000 square feet. So, you know, there's a huge variation in the size of parcels in the downtown. So, I mean, we're talking any new building we're required any building that's being newly constructed with a demo per this would require it. But I don't even know where there's the opportunity for that large of an addition to go on a building in downtown. But we still, if it's an impactful project, we still want to require that there's a more in-depth review.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. The 10,000, I'm just trying to get my brain around the 10,000 square foot. You know, is that a reasonable amount for downtown? I don't know, anyone else have any?
You're muted, Susan.
Commissioner Burns.
Okay, yeah. So I think what Mike Hopp was saying is very accurate. There's quite a range of, you know, we have little storefronts. We have the larger properties, obviously the deck. I mean, it's 6 levels. That'd be about 180,000 square feet. FFC is big, but then you have the Magic Mirror, where my mother-in-law used to go to get her hair done. A little tiny footprint. So you want to have both ways, I guess. Greater than 10,000 feet, 50% FAR. That implies, okay, if you had a 5,000 foot building, you doubled it. Or no, I'm sorry. This would be a 20,000 foot building. Adding 10,000 feet would be a 50% increase. But we have a lot of buildings that are much, much smaller than 20,000 feet. So if you put an addition of, if you added the FAR 50% on a 2,000 foot building, there'd be another 1,000 square feet. But it seems like a significant increase in what the business use is going to be, right? Even if it's a 2,000 foot building, if they're going to 1,000 feet, I don't know how they would do that unless they had enough site area, or if they went up. But you know, one project that might come in is, what was the proposal for like the art center facing the train station?
Yes.
Elmhurst Center for the Performing Arts, correct. That will be bigger than 10,000 square feet.
And all the discussion we've had previously, back when the sub-area plans were coming in, about what to do with the donut hole that's inside of between York and Addison in there, and could that be redeveloped? That would be a major redevelopment. So obviously that would be captured. just a question, I think, of what do we want these smaller projects to be pulled in as well? And as I'm reading this, is this all limited by the 75-foot frontage? In other words, more than 10,000 foot addition or more than 50% FAR increase, as long as it also was 75 feet or more of street frontage?
That's a good point. I think that's how it reads right now, but with all those other requirements in the top, the 75 feet even make a difference anymore.
Like, should it be or 75 feet or more of street frontage?
Yeah, I think it makes more sense if you don't say or 75 feet, because if you add that to it, now I mean, you really are, it's excluding a lot of things.
Or
Any more discussion on this?
if I could go back though.
Sure.
So the proposed change, it's any newly constructed building, that's one trigger, or an addition greater than 10,000 feet, second trigger, or FAR increased by more than 50%, third trigger, or 75 feet or more of frontage, fourth trigger. But do we want to say any newly constructed building? What if it's on a 25-foot lot and it's going to be an 800 square foot building or something? Should that be PUD? So
I don't know if it should be a PUD, to be honest with you. I think that raises that you include things that maybe shouldn't be included. That would be my thought. But
so should we say any newly constructed building, and should we have a minimum building size, or maybe for that have the minimum 75-foot frontage? Or in other words, something that would say only a reasonably significant project would come in as a PUD.
Commissioner Burns, are you asking if that we should put a minimum square footage on this, like 1,000 square feet or something, or 2,000 square feet?
That would be one idea.
what would be the value of that, of setting the minimum? Explain to me what you're thinking.
Well, my thinking is that if somebody went and said, we're going to tear down the Magic Mirror building, which is a little pipsqueak little building, and we're going to build a new modern building with modern finishes, the same exact size as the Magic Mirror. Does that need a PUD process?
See, I would argue that it may not.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, because I think that's, that's the type 2 error. Then we're including things that, we're making it more difficult.
What if it was at the corner of York and Palmer, or York and Second, where it's a more impactful, could have more impact on our downtown, depending on what that building would be, what that project would be. I mean, I think that's part of the plan development, is the impact project can have on our downtown. That's why it's so more restrictive in the downtown than anywhere else. But there could be a 74-foot lot somewhere that's going to have like the most impactful building possible, and it doesn't require a plan development, which could be fine. I mean, we picked 75 feet. When we remember we had this discussion back when we picked 75 feet. We had 25 feet, we had 100 feet, we had all kinds of different feet, and then we decided on 75 feet because we thought that was the right number. Is it still the right number?
Yeah, I mean, an example of that might be the Kovach Eye Clinic. Okay, should that have been a PUD? It's pretty impactful where its location, its size. Should that have been a PUD? I could argue that it should have been. Commissioner Pittman.
I guess I'm just thinking that what's the likelihood of one of these smaller properties being torn down and replaced with another smaller new construction property? I think it's probably pretty low. I think it's more likely that there will be land assemblage and larger things happening. And I worry that if we mess with something, having a minimum and letting some things potentially go through that then we regret, I guess I worry about that more than this being too cumbersome and having this be a huge burden on most people. I guess I haven't seen anything come through since I've been on the commission that I feel so strongly about that it shouldn't have been a PUD. There's been something in there that I've been glad that it was a PUD and we've had the opportunity to have a discussion. I guess, so that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. Commissioner Hoffman?
So I obviously wasn't at the last discussion on this, but I seem to recall a slide that was shown just recently that there is the potential for the process to be waived. I mean, can't we address that through a waiver if something does come across where it's too small or maybe, meets these criteria, but, holy cow, it doesn't seem to make sense to have them go through the whole process?
I think that would be a good way to use a waiver, but I want to go back to us. We would really have to develop some good criteria for using a waiver and empower city staff to develop that. Melissa.
Yeah, I guess, to what Commissioner Hoffman said, and then what you've been discussing, I also think that in theory, it would be great to be able to do that, but I also think it's hard to create something that's completely impartial that addresses those things that maybe wouldn't, I worry it would get us in trouble. I think it might be extremely difficult to create that waiver. I did like that in this last PUD that we just discussed, Eileen waived a bunch of things so that there wasn't a huge burden on the applicant because it was, really one thing, the parking. I wonder if that's the route to go, to really sort of be able to give staff the ability to waive certain things so that even though they do have to go through the process is as easy as it could possibly be.
Carol?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on that. I think for the sake of transparency, the staff should compile a list of what has been waived and why. We didn't really see that in the last PUD, and I think in the interest of public benefit that should be made available for review to understand what's been waived and why. That point, but I do think that really helps because sometimes I look at some of these standards as applied to a specific project and they just, some of them just really don't apply. And I imagine through the permitting process that the city staff goes through, there's similar issues. So I think giving them that authority and power could really help improve efficiencies, but it does need, I think, to be transparent in how that's done and what's been done and why.
Really, you raise a really good point there, so that we talk about this waiver and maybe we should give staff the ability to do that they would just come back and advise us why they had waived PUD and why, and what those factors were. And we would just have the ability to counter and say, no, that's not a good idea. But that just to give them that freedom to do that. And we would just kind of retrospectively affirm it. And that's one way that avoids the problem of let's set up criteria. I'm like, I always want to do that, but that would avoid that issue.
Yeah, I like the ability of the commission to override, if that's the right word, city staff, or maybe there's something that comes out in our discussion that hadn't been considered by staff. So then we would have the ability to revert it back to a PUD if there were some, missed piece of information or something. But, city staff really does a pretty good job in terms of going through these things and catching all those details. So I'm in favor of anything that would help streamline the process and make it a little easier on applicants. So that as long as the transparency piece were addressed and it could be, that information were brought out into the public.
So let's bring it down to concrete examples. So for example, then this case on Larch, okay, they could have said, look, we're going to suggest that we waive the requirement to make that a PUD, and this is why, and give us a rationale, and then we could either affirm or not affirm that. Does that make some sense as well? Eileen, do you think that's workable for city staff?
I think it could be. I would like to talk to our attorneys about that.
Yeah, yes.
I was also thinking, as Commissioner Snyder was talking, we could add a section in the staff report about the items that were waived and with an explanation. So it would be very clear in the report, the list of requirements and kind of an explanation and whether it was included or whether it was waived. And then another idea I had as we were just sitting here talking tonight is we've had a few situations where, you know, a case would have had to come before the commission anyway, but now it's coming through as a plan development. What if there was an opportunity for an applicant to choose, you know, I would prefer just to do a conditional use permit and ask for a variation. I don't want to do a plan development. So they're still coming before the commission and having that public process. I'm not really sure how that would look, but that might be something to consider as well. In cases where the applicant has to come either way, they could choose not to do a plan development and choose to do a more traditional zoning application.
And wouldn't we have the opportunity in that case, if they came to say, to reject it, right? And say, you know, this really should be a PUD for whatever reason, but we as a commission could say, well, we're not approving this, and, you know, here's why.
I think so.
That could really delay. I mean, we're talking how to streamline this. They would just do the opposite. They're going to come to you with thinking to do it a conditional use, and then they get to you and you go, wait a minute, we want this to PUD. Go back to the drawing board, do these 7 other standards or whatever it would be. I think that would be.
Yeah, but isn't that part of kind of what you guys do regardless, you know, when people come through the process and they meet with you and, you know, I mean, I would think it would be fairly rare that you would say, look, this really should be a PUD, and somebody says, no, I want to do it, you know, as just a conditional use or, you know, whatever. Then they're sort of in their own delay.
Well, I go back to the, you know, the reason for the PUD is to allow some creativity in development. I mean, that's real. So without having to go with this variance and this variance and this variance, it's a broader look. So that's my understanding of really the purpose of the PUD is to do that. But if someone can do the same project and with, because it would mean that they really met everything except the conditional use, and that's what they wanted.
I guess I look at it as when you talk about, or we talk about what the purpose of the PUD is, to allow for creativity and development, right? The creativity is not necessarily for the commission. It's really the creativity for the applicants.
Yes.
Right? And so if they don't want to be creative, for lack of a better term, I mean, then that's okay if that's how they want to go through. But that may mean that, you know, it gets delayed or that it doesn't get, you know, whatever the reason is. But that's the applicant's decision. I don't look at it as really our decision in terms of how they should apply and go through the process.
If they can apply for just a conditional use, I mean, I think they should be able to do that. I mean, I hear Mike's voice in my ear saying, yeah, but what about it? You know, they just want to do a conditional use and it's in an area that is really impactful. That's such a qualitative judgment. If they're meeting the criteria, why are we going to force them to be creative? I don't know.
Well, I mean, part of it's not just creativity too. It's like for the plan development, part of it was also for input sooner in the process. Staff, public input, city council input before development goes beyond a certain point. And it's for a comfort level, somewhat for the developer. So a lot of it was geared towards these larger projects too. And then we're seeing that some of these smaller projects, maybe it's not as important as it was for some of these more larger, impactful projects. So is there a way to make it easier for the King Transmissions, for the large townhomes to go through the process? I mean, maybe that's part of the discussion. But again, it's like, you know, part of it was to get that input from the staff, public, city council prior to committing to what it is you're going to do.
Well, and that's the thing, you know, Dave Garland was very articulate about that last time we met, in saying that, you know, one of the things that he would hate to lose with many of these is that option for that, before anything started, to have a neighborhood meeting. That's a really key piece that he valued in the PUD. So, I mean, it sounds like you're saying size matters. I mean, in this, that it's clear that if anything is large, that should be a PUD. So we're talking about large, creativity, those things should be PUDs.
And then we talked about the 75 feet. I think that's how we came to the number. When you're at 75 feet, that's a pretty impactful project in our downtown.
Right. But not so impactful in that neighborhood transition. 75 feet,
Correct.
that's, you know, that's the frontage in the RE zoning district. So it's not that, it isn't that impactful in that zoning district, so. Carol?
Yeah, I think Mike brought up a really good point about the PUD. And okay, I totally just lost my train of thought. But, you know, I think I would really be cautious and hesitant about giving an applicant the ability to choose conditional use versus PUD. Some of them don't really understand the nuances completely, aren't entirely familiar with it, and might just want to choose the easiest route. But also the PUDs, they also provide more opportunity for us to give more tools for us to control some of the design aesthetic elements. You know, we've heard from people in the past who are like, why did you allow that thing to go up that way? And look at the materials or lack of brick or whatever. But to Mike's point, and circling back, it really allows for the people to come together much earlier in the process, for the communications channels to open up a lot sooner. So I really would prefer to see staff be the ones to say, you know, make that judgment call rather than an applicant. I think our city staff would be great in terms of being able to guide an applicant about why it would be better PUD versus why better conditional use, et cetera, or variance. So it's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand what you're saying. I think that does make sense, because, like, you know, we struggle with what a PUD is, and, you know, you get somebody who wants to build it and it's like, well, I just want the easiest route. I want to get this thing done. So why would I bother going through all of that? And I'm sympathetic to them, you know, in that thought, but.
You know, going back to like tonight's King Transmission, right? We've sort of talked internally that probably did need to go through a PUD, but there was a lot of good discussion here on that. It could have came in just a variance for the parking. But on the same token, I guess if we really looked at this closely, so what delay did it cause the King Transmission? What extra cost did it cost King Transmission? I mean, maybe their application had to be delayed slightly because of those pre-meetings, but I mean, there really wasn't a lot of cost to them for that. Maybe there's some time delay. I mean, you know, you look at the townhomes, there was no attorney involved in it. They did have an attorney involved, so maybe there was some cost for that. But I mean, the public meeting was, you know, $80 worth of postage or something like that, maybe, you know. So going back to like what Commissioner Pitt was saying, and maybe the fallback is the safer side of it, is maybe they go through the plan development, unless there's some, you know, specific criteria we can come up with that says if it's less than this or greater than this, then they should or shouldn't go through it. I mean, I know going back to staff, we could probably come up with, you know, whether it should or should not, but I think same on our side, we like to have some criteria that we measure it by too, because the consistency of it is sometimes becomes difficult when we waive this one, but we didn't waive that one because in our opinion, it was more impactful or was not more impactful. we'd still want some kind of like criteria that we would measure that against, just to like more than anything cover our butt throughout from one project to the next project. I mean, that's my opinion. Eileen might feel different, but.
Well, it opens you up to a lot of, I think, unnecessary public criticism. And that would concern me. Well, why did you waive this guy and not us? And if you have some objective standards for that, it makes some better sense. I mean, if you guys think you can come up with some that are broad enough but specific enough to do that, I think that would be helpful. So people could ask to be, I don't want to do a PUD. I mean, can this be waived? And there would be some standard. I just think those criteria would also protect city staff from unnecessary criticism.
Yeah, so a formal application process for a waiver, a formal waiver application process is what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
With some, and the criteria can have, I mean, you still can have a lot of room in that for judgment, but at least it does provide that sense of we're not just doing it on, gee, Mike Kopp likes this or he doesn't like it. That I just think that's not fair to staff to do that, to set them up like that.
We can research too. I mean, we're working with Camiros right now for a zoning ordinance. We can ask them, do other communities have any kind of waiver process? We can check with our peers and see if they have anything like that, and use that as some kind of template if they do.
Okay, that would be a great. I always think that's a good idea too. So, can we go on to the next slide then? Do we feel like we've discussed this one sufficiently, Kevin?
Just one other note, and this is more just a kind of a general thematic thing, is obviously we want to do everything we can for applicants so that we don't bollocks up their process unnecessarily. But I think just the fact that we have a zoning ordinance, there's an underlying implication that the city has an interest in how things get built and developed. And the PUD is part of that. And a good example of this, which goes back, I know, Chair Rose, you've mentioned this before, northeast corner of 83 and North Avenue. That after some frustration, the builder just said, I'm going to build something as of right, and everything's going to have its rear end facing North Avenue. Well, if that was required to be a PUD, we wouldn't have let them do that.
Right.
So that it's just this idea that, yes, there is a civic interest in how these projects play out. And we just want to be sensitive to what the limits are. I mean, we don't want to get into like we're a command economy and dictating what people.
Right. Right.
But there is that interest.
Well, and the consistency, any developer really wants a consistent message. They don't want, well, this or maybe this. It's like, let us know what are the rules, what needs to be done, and we'll make determination about whether this is where we want to invest, how we want to do that, et cetera. So I always think that for development purposes, there's a lot of value in having some consistent rules as opposed to it's just the whim of whatever. So if you guys could find out, if just do a little work on that, that would be great. Want to go on to the next slide? All right.
Big one, this one, same thing, is adding square footage to the size rather than just percentage of FAR in the 2 acres to 5 acres. And so that would have made a big difference. Like tonight, King Transmission might have met that. The reason they were here for 2 acres. The issue we have with the 2 acre one is should there be commercial different than industrial? We've had a couple industrial buildings that are just over 2 acres. They want to put a small addition on the back of their building where they meet all the zoning requirements, but they have to go through the PUD if they did it. So that's sort of where it's like, is there a way to write this where it's the addition is different? If you could stay at 2 acres, and it would cover more of the commercial, but it still has other, I don't know. That's the problem with this. Is the one that's probably the one that's been the most impactful as far as requiring PUDs. is that 2 acres? Because there are quite a few parcels above 2 acres. in the
Well, that's
commercial-
what brought community church in, wasn't it? Because it was
That's
over
correct,
2 acres.
church in there, exactly.
Yeah, that's one reason it brought that in. But I look at Redeemer, their original, remember when they wanted to sell that, break up that land to the east of them and put houses and that should have been a PUD. That was kind of a mess, really. So, but 5 acres.
We could, I mean, this is all, I mean, this is right. We have the downtown than everything else. We could have different zoning districts have different criteria, which the old zoning ordinance actually did. Every zoning district had a PUD trigger in it they were different.
There's some wisdom in that. I can see that. So for example, in a residential area, you would want it to be smaller, 2 acres. That would, you might even say perhaps it should be even smaller than that. But in the industrial area, 5 acres would be more than sufficient. That's just what my thoughts are.
So I mean, if everybody else, I mean, whatever else's thoughts are, we could somehow, take a look at the different zoning districts and, we could come up with something different from each one if that's of interest to the commission.
What do you guys think? Melissa?
I agree. I think that makes the most sense. I think trying to create some blanket PUD outside of the downtown area, it's never going to work across all the different zoning districts. It's got to be specific to each zoning district.
Yep. I like that idea, Mike.
I agree. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, with all the different frontage requirements for each of the different zoning districts, I mean, they each have different characteristics that just can't be covered by a blanket, 5 acres or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a great idea to pursue.
Well, you're seeing that. So for example, if someone in, the RE zoning district, which is 75 feet of frontage, wanted to do something kind of unusual with their property, they'd have to come in and do a PUD. The individual homeowner would have to do that. Well, I don't know. You could say, well, that's going to impact the neighborhood, but I don't know that. So I like this idea of different districts doing that. So if you guys could do that, that would make sense. Okay. I'm going to go to the next slide. All right. The appeal process.
We sort of talked about that already. We'll talk to Camaros, we'll talk to our peers, and we'll see if there's anybody else doing that right now. And even we'll talk to the city attorney to see if we can even do that.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of like either you have the appeal process or you have a waiver process, one or the other. And we just talked about that. So, okay. And the next one, the cleanup items.
We can add the color renderings in here and get a little more specific.
These are just, I don't think they're really that important right at this point. Now, can we go down to like the last few slides? Those are the ones that I think could be pretty impactful as we talk about. So if we go back up one right there. So the last one was, should there be additional discretion for staff in major or minor or modifications? If so, in what areas? And then if you go down to the next slide, Emily. So there's minor and major, right? Depending whether to come back or not. So the definition of major is anything that's not a minor is a major, which means you've got to go back to the plot process. So if you go to the minor then, which was the next couple slides. So a minor change, it talks about if it's consistent with what the concept was, then it's okay. But then there's specific criteria on the next slide. Actually, the next 2 slides. Shall not increase the plan development's density or increase the height, decrease parking by more, I think it's increased parking. Parking counts by more than 5%. Alter alignment of roads, utilities, the building scale, building bulk, building materials, building placement, orientation, building materials. Then the next slide, there's even more of them on there. So the question comes up is that could this be changed? Should this be changed? Because when we're doing this from the preliminary to final, and Eileen's going through all these things, and Emily, sometimes it gets sort of difficult. There is such minor changes, but let's just say we had a building that's 40 feet high and the new plan comes in, it's 40 feet, 4 inches because the way the construction materials were designed, whatever. We have to, technically, let's go back to through the process again. You know, the parking counts by 5%, decreased by 5%. So should it be, could it be 10%? I don't know. Or is it, there was a 5% or not, or a different, or a number? I don't know. It's just like some of these things, when you're going preliminary to final, they're so minute on some of these things. Could they be written in a way that gives Eileen and Emily a little more leniency to say it's a minor rather than anything else?
I would like to see that, because that is the flip side of the issue that's the issue that's always been a problem, you know, which is what is substantive, what's a substantive change? You know, what is something substantive? This is just the flip side of that. What is minor? So if you guys can come up with more definition of that, that would make your life easier, that we could then discuss piece by piece, I think that's fine. I would like to see that, I think.
This is one of the things I think the commission, and we know the DPC committee talked about for the whole zoning ordinance too, is like giving you more authority. Right now you have limited authority, like on the front setback for a porch or whatever. I don't know what, Eileen can probably what the percentages are, but should it be greater? Should a front porch, like you guys are right now, final authority on fences? Should be things that the commission has final authority on. Should be a greater, or have this administrative process also, you know, where there's a lot of things that come to the commission that maybe, I mean, they're so minute to the change that maybe it would be a lot easier for the resident to just come through and there's a zoning administrative process to be able to do it. I don't know.
Eileen?
So, and one other thing, and I didn't even get a chance to talk about this with Mike and Emily that much before this meeting. Recently, I was dealing with Lexington Square on a sign replacement, and they are a PUD. That project was a PUD from like the late 80s, early 90s. And one of the conditions of the PUD involved the sign. And they were given some relief from our sign requirements, but it looks, it's possible that the sign that was out there was larger than what was approved, and they were hoping to replace it with the size of the sign that's currently out there now. So they would not be able to under our current code because it's too large and it doesn't appear to meet the conditions of the PUD approval from that original case. So they would need to go through an entire PUD process for that particular sign increase, which normally we would say you need a variation. And I mean, it is on a busy road, which is why I think they were given the relief in the first place. So I'm wondering if there should be an opportunity for changes to a PUD that don't necessarily require, that may still go to the commission, but maybe doesn't need the entire full process. Because I don't know, I do think if something is a condition, it's in an ordinance. It's not something that I can just say, you know what, this was a long time ago, I think you should be able to do it. But I don't know that the entire project PUD needs to be redone for something like that. So is there another way where there's sort of I don't know. It's tough when it's a condition, but I'm wondering if there's a way we could do a smaller.
It would be like an amendment to the PUD.
Yeah, that might not have the full process with it.
Let me just ask this. You know, can we address some of these questions to John Housel, you know, who was our original guy with this? Can we just run? I'm curious what other towns do. I mean, that with these, because what do you think? Is that possible?
It could be. I mean, we're working with Camaros right now. They're under contract with us right now. And this is part of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So if that's okay with you, we can ask, you know, Camaros rather than John Housel.
Fine, let's ask him. As a consultant, let's ask them if that's within the bounds of the contract, you know, some of these questions, you know, is this reasonable to think about? Are other communities doing this kind of thing? You know, I always like to keep us in the middle of that. So
yeah, we did tell them that we're doing this process right now. It's part of the whole zoning ordinance, but this is one of the things that, because the whole zoning ordinance, it could be a year from now by the time that gets done. This is one of the things that we thought city council said the same thing. We wanted to review this right now and start getting that process going quicker. So they're aware of where we're doing this, and we already talked to her about possibly some questions to help us through this process.
So maybe we should invite them to a commission meeting and talk about it with them. Is that
I mean-
possible?
Yeah, and we could say, can we do this sort of ahead of the rest of the, get their assistants to work on this particular chapter of the ordinance prior to the remainder of the ordinance?
Right. I mean, that's their, that's their level of expertise. So that I would, actually, I would welcome that. I don't know what other commissioners think on that, but I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay.
Now, on these 5 bullet points on this page that's up, actually the bottom 3, I think you really don't need any quantitative measure for this. You just say, look, if you're changing the road alignment, you're changing bulk proportions, building materials, architectural style. If it's a change, it's a change. And then
Right.
it wouldn't be minor. It's those first 2 where I think you need quantitative.
Exactly. Right. Decreasing parking counts, density, right? These kinds of things. So, okay.
What is it? Is it that black and white? So, I mean, the roof line on a project changed by, it went from it was a 3-degree slope to a 5-degree slope. That's a change in the roof line. So they got to go back to the whole process again. So that's the kind of things like, is there any leeway that can be on these that, because right now, it's black and white right now. If the building's 2 inches taller, it's got to go back through the process again. If the roof line changes at all, it's got to go back through the process again. Is there a way that could be administratively, is there any leeway in that at all? Should there be any leeway in that? Maybe not.
Well, let's see. I would really hope and advocate for some leeway, because that just seems like the worst of bureaucracy and government is to do something like that. That just seems like the worst. There's got to be some, that maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I would hope that there is. I mean, I understand that this, the use of the ordinance, but that would be a great question to ask them. Okay. Do you guys think you believe you've got enough to work on to make some? Okay. Any other commissioner got some thoughts on this, or want to put in your 2 cents worth on this? It's complicated, as they say. Those who don't, you don't want to watch how government works. It's a complicated process sometimes, but it's what we do. So, okay. We will then close the discussion on that. Eileen, any other business?
So a couple things. First of all, Kiki, would you be able to expedite the transcripts so that we could have those by Friday afternoon?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then it looks like the commission will not be meeting in August at all. And then in September, we have a conflict with the city council meeting due to Labor Day. So we're still trying to determine could you mute?
I'm sorry, thank you.
We're also at the end of one of the governor's executive orders later this week. So this may also be our last meeting over Zoom. And if it is, in fact, if by September we're meeting in person, we may be able to meet the same night as city council in another room in City Hall if we are not doing it over Zoom. So I'll be sending you an email when we know a little bit more about what's going on. So it's possible our first meeting in September will be on Tuesday. It's possible we will need to reschedule that to either Wednesday, I think it's the 8th, or the following Tuesday. It also looks like we may not have a meeting, our second meeting in September, which I believe is the 21st, but we may need to have 2 meetings in September. So I know I'm being kind of confusing here. So we may have a Labor Day, a meeting the week of Labor Day, and we may need to have a meeting that following week instead of the 3rd week of September. So I will send an email shortly with all this information and kind of polling you and what your availability is.
Thank you. during the pandemic, we learned to live with uncertainty. So this is, we really, I want to compliment all the commissioners. I mean, we had so many meetings in the spring and the first half of this year, and you guys did a great job with that. But as things loosen up here with the pandemic, there's a lot of uncertainty about how, when, et cetera, we're going to do. So I would just, beg your flexibility again as we, try to work our way through this. We don't really know how it's going to work. What's the governor going to do? I mean, there's all kinds of uncertainty. So what we know is there will be no meeting in August. We know that. So September, we don't know, but we will let you know before then. So hopefully, and then Eileen will poll everybody to find out if we have to meet on a Wednesday. Can you do that? And we'll find that out pretty quickly, because they need to know, we all need to know like a month ahead of time in order to actually make that happen. So that's where we are. Any other business? Okay. So then, Commissioner Burns.
And not to bring up our favorite topic again unnecessarily, but I noticed there were some new postings for Roberto's on board docs, which I read with great interest. And it looks like the neighbors are asking that DPZ remand the case back to us. Now, I know DPZ, I think, are they meeting Monday, taking it up again? But is that a possibility?
Yes. Sorry.
Go ahead.
They are going to have it on their agenda again next Monday. At the last meeting, City Attorney Andy Acker stated that it does not need to be remanded back to the Zoning and Planning Commission due to the recommendation of that Plan B parking configuration.
Okay, thanks.
We'll see. Stay tuned. Right. Yeah, we don't know. We'll see. So we rely on what our attorneys tell us. We just have to. These are like minefields, some of these cases. And if we were, I just am reluctant to not really listen to what they have to say, because they are the ones who really are directing us in this. So. All right, seeing no other business, other business, I will ask for a motion to adjourn, a motion and a second to adjourn. Commissioner Pittman moves, Commissioner Snyder seconds. All those, I'll ask Eileen to call the roll.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes, we are adjourned. Great job, everybody. Enjoy August.